During my lunch break, a coworker leaned over to look at the new watch my husband had given me. That sparkling silver piece was not just keeping time, it was counting down to my ruin. The man who held me every night was meticulously weaving an invisible net to send me to federal prison for 20 years. If he wanted to play predator, I would show him exactly how the prey swallows you whole. Hello and welcome back to Violet Revenge Stories. Recently, YouTube disabled monetization for our channel, leaving us without the budget needed to keep our operations running. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting our team with just $1, so our staff can pay for their living expenses and continue creating these narratives for you. You can donate by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you for your kindness. My name is Emery Davis, and I am the lead engineer at EtherCore Solutions. The walls of my pristine corner office seemed to shrink, pressing inward until the air grew thin and unbreathable. I sat paralyzed at my mahogany desk, the harsh fluorescent lights glaring off the disassembled pieces of the heavy silver watch scattered across my leather blotter. Julian had given it to me just 1 month ago for our 5th wedding anniversary. He had looked into my eyes with that warm, honey-brown gaze, clasping the cold metal around my wrist and whispering that he wanted to count every second of our lives together. I am a security tech engineer. Finding vulnerabilities and taking things apart is what I do. When the dial started sticking this morning, I instinctively grabbed a precision screwdriver from my drawer to adjust the casing. I expected to find a loose gear or a displaced spring. Instead, tucked neatly beneath the silver backplate, nested tight beside the battery, was a matte black microchip. It was a military-grade GPS transceiver hardwired directly to a data cloning node. A violent wave of nausea slammed into my stomach. The metallic taste of bile rose in the back of my throat, and a cold, prickly sweat broke out across my forehead and ran down my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, beating so hard and fast that my vision blurred at the edges. The room began to spin. The man who kissed me goodnight, the man who held my hand while we walked through the park, was tracking my every physical movement and cloning the secure data from my personal devices. I scrambled to reassemble the watch, my hands shaking so violently I dropped the tiny screws twice. I shoved it back onto my wrist, the heavy silver now feeling like a tight iron shackle. I left work early, claiming a severe migraine. The drive home was a suffocating blur of hyperventilation and mounting terror, gripping the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I tried to force my panicked brain to think logically. I did not storm into the house and scream. I did not throw the broken watch at his face. Instead, I parked in the driveway and sat in the dead silence for 20 minutes, piecing together the fragmented puzzle of the past few weeks. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. The tea. For the past 2 months, I had been complaining about work-related insomnia. Julian, playing the role of the incredibly devoted husband, had taken to brewing me a special herbal tea every night before bed. Whenever I drank it, a thick, unnatural fog would roll over my brain. I would sleep for 10 hours straight and wake up feeling heavily disoriented, my limbs numb, my memory of the previous evening completely erased. I thought it was just the stress of the new project. Now, the realization coated my throat in ice. When Julian arrived home at 6 o'clock, he found me curled up on the living room sofa, wrapped tightly in a thick blanket. He dropped his briefcase by the door, his face instantly twisting into a mask of perfect, loving concern. He knelt beside me, gently brushing a damp strand of hair from my cheek. "You look terrible, sweetheart," he murmured softly. "Is the pressure at EtherCore getting to you again?" I forced a weak nod, fighting a vicious internal battle to suppress the urge to violently pull away from his touch. "I am fine," I lied, my voice trembling naturally from the sheer adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Just a headache." Julian sighed sympathetically and reached into his suit pocket, pulling out an orange prescription bottle. "Doctor, Evans gave me these for you yesterday. He said your stress levels are dangerously high and you need a chemical reset. Take one. It will help you sleep." He poured a glass of water and handed me a small, unmarked blue capsule. I looked up at his face. It was the exact same handsome, caring face I had fallen in love with 5 years ago. I placed the capsule on my tongue and took a large gulp of water, swallowing loudly, but the pill remained tucked securely against the inside of my cheek. Julian smiled warmly, kissed my forehead, and walked into the kitchen to prepare dinner, the very second he was out of sight. I rushed to the guest bathroom and spat the melting blue capsule into a tissue, flushing it away before washing my mouth out with cold water. That night, I lay perfectly motionless in our king-sized bed. I consciously regulated my breathing, matching the deep, rhythmic inhales and exhales of someone trapped in a medically induced coma. At exactly 2 a.m, the mattress shifted. Julian sat up. He stared down at me in the dark for 3 full minutes. I kept my eyes closed, not even allowing my eyelids to flutter under his intense scrutiny. Satisfied that I was completely unconscious, he quietly slipped out of bed. I cracked my eyes open just a fraction of an inch. The moonlight filtering through the bedroom blinds cast sharp, jagged shadows across the room as Julian walked directly over to my leather handbag. He reached inside and pulled out my EtherCore corporate security badge. My blood ran completely cold. He did not check my phone for text messages. He did not care about infidelity or jealousy. He walked over to his mahogany desk in the corner, booted up his laptop, and pulled a sleek black decryption skimmer from a hidden drawer. He placed my security badge on the skimmer, the green light blinking rapidly in the dark as it copied my highest-level administrative access credentials. The horrifying truth settled heavily over my chest, suffocating me. He was bypassing the firewall of one of the top cybersecurity firms in the country, and he was using my identity to do it. But the true, bottomless depth of his cruelty did not fully register until the next morning. After Julian left for the office, I broke into his locked medicine cabinet using a tension wrench from my engineering toolkit. I found the orange prescription bottle he had used last night. The pharmacy label was completely fake. I tipped one of the blue capsules into my trembling hand, examining the tiny, almost invisible serial number stamped on the gelatin casing. I typed the code into a pharmaceutical database on my encrypted tablet. The search results made my knees buckle. I sank to the cold bathroom tiles, gasping for air as the walls spun violently around me. It was not a sedative. It was a highly potent combination of a heavy antipsychotic and a synthetic hallucinogen. The documented side effects included severe paranoia, sudden memory loss, auditory hallucinations, and rapid cognitive deterioration. Julian was not just hacking my company to steal data. He was meticulously and intentionally poisoning me, carefully manufacturing a documented medical history that would prove I was suffering a severe psychological breakdown. The man I married was systematically trying to make me go insane. The terror from the previous night burned out completely, leaving behind a frozen, crystalline clarity in my mind. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of my home office, my personal engineering rig humming quietly in the background. It was exactly 8 a.m. Julian had kissed my cheek, told me he loved me, and left for his architectural firm. The second the heavy oak front door clicked shut, the frightened, trembling wife vanished. In her place, the lead engineer took the wheel. You do not survive in high-level cybersecurity by crying over breached firewalls. You isolate the threat, you patch the vulnerability, and you trap the intruder. I logged into our home network administration panel. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, systematically bypassing the standard security protocols I had ironically set up to protect our smart home from outside hackers. Now, the hacker was sleeping in my bed. I created a shadow network, a highly sophisticated digital honeypot meticulously disguised as our primary internet router. I utilized advanced packet-sniffing algorithms and MAC address spoofing to ensure that every single byte of data Julian sent or received from his devices would now be routed silently through a hidden virtual server on my machine. It would be decrypted, copied, and cataloged, all before continuing to its actual destination without him ever noticing a drop in bandwidth. It took exactly 3 hours for the trap to spring. At 11 a.m, A massive data packet hit my secondary monitor. Julian was operating from his downtown office, but his personal laptop was executing a scheduled background synchronization. I intercepted the data stream mid-air. It was shielded by 256-bit encryption, layered in defensive protocols that would take a standard brute force algorithm several weeks to crack open. But Julian was an architect, not a master coder. He had purchased a commercially available encryption key off the dark web, one with a known architectural backdoor I had personally patched for EtherCore corporate clients nearly 2 years ago. I ran a custom decryption script, and the scrambled binary instantly collapsed into plain English text. It was a heavily secured private messaging application. The contact name was simply listed as Vanessa. I scrolled through over 6 months of chat logs, my jaw clenching so hard that a sharp pain shot up through my temples. The messages were a vile, stomach-churning cocktail of graphic sexual fantasies interwoven with precise corporate espionage. They were not just having a sordid, mundane affair. Julian was providing her with daily, itemized progress reports on my professional work. "She is breaking down perfectly," Julian had written on Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon. "The algorithm is complete. She brought the final encrypted drive home last night. I will have the uncompressed source code by Friday." Vanessa had replied exactly 1 minute later. "Make sure the data packet is absolutely pristine. My board of directors is ready to authorize the offshore wire transfer. $3 billion for the clean code. Do not mess this up. Julian, I want to wake up next to you with that money secured." $3 billion. They were plotting to steal the core cryptographic defense algorithm I had spent 4 agonizing years developing for my employer. I needed to see this phantom woman with my own eyes. When Saturday afternoon arrived, Julian cheerfully packed his expensive leather golf bag into the trunk of his sports car, claiming he had a confirmed tee time for 18 holes with his senior partners. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and waited exactly 2 minutes before tailing him in an unassuming gray sedan I had rented under a false name early that morning. He did not drive anywhere near the suburban country club. He drove straight into the heart of the financial district, pulling directly into the underground VIP parking garage of a towering luxury penthouse complex. I parked 3 blocks away and made my way on foot to an unfinished commercial building directly across the avenue. I climbed the concrete stairs to the 20th floor, the raw construction dust coating my boots, and set up a high-powered military observation scope by the floor-to-ceiling window frames. Through the magnified glass lenses, I scanned the expansive glass-walled penthouse on the 22nd floor opposite my position. It took 10 minutes before they finally walked into the living room. Julian dropped his golf bag near a pristine white leather sofa and pulled a tall, striking brunette into a desperate, hungry embrace. My chest remained completely hollow, entirely devoid of the heartbreak a normal wife might feel. I simply adjusted the focus dial and zoomed in on the woman. She was wearing a sharp, tailored slate gray business suit, but what caught my absolute, undivided attention was the lanyard hanging around her neck. The high-resolution glass revealed a prominent, metallic blue identification badge. It bore the unmistakable geometric insignia of Omnitech Industries. Omnitech was EtherCore's absolute largest and most aggressive competitor in the global cybersecurity market. Vanessa was not just a greedy mistress. She was a high-level corporate espionage operative. The entire, horrifying scope of their master plan clicked into place inside my mind like the heavy, interlocking gears of a bank vault door. I backed away from the window, the cold draft of the unfinished building biting at my face, as I mathematically deduced their endgame based on the intercepted files and the physical evidence before me. Julian was going to use my cloned security credentials to extract the $3 billion algorithm from my personal corporate vault. He would hand it directly to Vanessa, who would seamlessly integrate it into Omnitech's new defense network, financially crushing EtherCore overnight. But the data theft would leave a massive digital footprint leading right back to my specific administrative account. When the federal cybercrime investigators inevitably came knocking at our door, Julian would act the part of the devastated husband. He would hand them the meticulously forged medical records detailing my severe psychological breakdown and heavy hallucinogenic drug use. He would testify under oath, with fake tears in his eyes, that his brilliant wife had cracked under the immense pressure of the tech industry. The narrative was absolutely bulletproof. A deranged, paranoid engineer, suffering from severe hallucinations, had spitefully downloaded and leaked her own company secrets to a rival in a fit of drug-induced madness. EtherCore would launch a $100 million civil suit against me. The federal courts would look at my fabricated psychiatric history and the corrupted data logs, and I would be sentenced to spend 40 years without parole in a maximum security federal penitentiary for economic sabotage and corporate treason. Meanwhile, Julian would file for a sympathetic divorce from his dangerously insane wife. He would legally secure 100% of our joint assets, take his massive untraceable cut of the $3 billion from Omnitech, and disappear into a life of luxury with Vanessa, completely untouchable by the law. They truly thought they had engineered the perfect corporate murder. They thought they were dealing with a fragile, over-medicated victim who would quietly lose her mind and take the fall without a fight. They severely underestimated the woman they were trying to destroy. I packed up my observation scope and walked back down the concrete stairs to the rental car. A cold, predatory smile slowly stretching across my face. The hunt had officially begun. The easiest thing to do would have been to walk into the local Federal Bureau of Investigation field office, slam my corporate badge on the counter, and demand an agent. But I knew better. If I blew the whistle right then, Julian would simply wipe his hard drives, burn the decryption skimmer, and play the bewildered victim. He would hand the investigators the fake medical prescriptions, show them the tracking data, and claim I was having a severe paranoid schizophrenic episode without the actual transfer of the stolen algorithm to the Omnitech servers. I had nothing but circumstantial evidence and a bloodstream full of synthetic hallucinogens. I would be walking straight into his trap, cementing my own status as the delusional, dangerous wife. No, I could not just stop him. I had to let him steal it. I needed him to initiate a massive, undeniable data breach, caught red-handed in the digital act. To do that, I had to take absolute control of his timeline. On Monday evening, as we sat across from each other at the dining room table eating a roast chicken he had prepared, I deliberately set my silver fork down with a loud clatter. My hands were visibly shaking, a physiological side effect I did not even have to fake, born purely from the sheer adrenaline that now permanently coursed through my veins. "I cannot take this anymore. Julian," I whispered, letting my voice crack with manufactured exhaustion and despair. EtherCore is pushing the timeline. The board of directors just announced a total infrastructure overhaul. They are migrating the entire network to a closed-loop quantum server this coming Friday at midnight. Everything gets locked down. No external access. No remote data transfers. If I do not finish optimizing the core code by Friday afternoon, I am going to lose my job. I watched his eyes closely. To anyone else, his expression was a perfect mask of tender, loving concern. But I saw the microscopic tightening of his jaw, the rapid, panicked calculation behind his pupils. Friday. I had just handed him a concrete deadline. He had exactly 4 days to pull off a $3 billion heist, or his window of opportunity would slam shut forever. "It will be okay, sweetheart," he murmured gently, reaching across the polished mahogany table to squeeze my trembling hand. "Just get through this week. You can rest after Friday. I promise you." The moment his breathing evened out in sleep that night, I went to work. I bypassed the home network and logged into the EtherCore mainframe using a secure, untraceable terminal I had built into the hollowed-out chassis of an old guitar amplifier down in the basement. For the next 3 nights, operating on exactly 0 hours of actual sleep, I rewrote the very fabric of my life's work. I took the authentic cryptographic defense algorithm and meticulously hollowed it out, replacing the functional core with a massive, highly aggressive Trojan virus. I engineered the malware to look, weigh, and behave exactly like a fully compiled, pristine data package. If Vanessa ran a preliminary diagnostic scan on it, her systems would report a 100% clean, authentic source code. But the absolute second she integrated that file into the Omnitech secure servers and executed the initialization command, the Trojan would detonate. It was a digital acid bomb. It would not just corrupt the stolen files, it would aggressively spider outward, bypassing all internal corporate firewalls and irreversibly erase every single database, backup server, and client ledger. Omnitech possessed. While I spent my nights weaving this invisible death trap, my days were dedicated to a grueling, humiliating performance. Julian needed me to be crazy, so I gave him a cinematic masterpiece of insanity. On Wednesday afternoon, he came home from his firm to find me sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by hundreds of shredded corporate documents. I had spent 2 hours tearing apart meaningless compliance reports, my fingertips raw and bleeding slightly from the paper cuts. When he walked through the door, I let out a blood-curdling scream, hurling a heavy glass vase at the wall mere inches from his head. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, sending shards raining down on the hardwood floor. "They are listening," I shrieked, tearing wildly at my own hair and hyperventilating until my chest ached. "The walls are humming. Julian, the code is in the walls. You have to make them stop." Through the chaotic, tear-filled haze of my performance, I saw the subtle, triumphant smirk playing on the corner of his lips. He slowly pulled his smartphone from his suit pocket, holding it discreetly at waist height, the tiny red recording light blinking steadily in the dim room. He was documenting my collapse. He was gathering his visual evidence for the inevitable civil trial. I threw myself to the floor, sobbing hysterically into my hands, while a cold, calculating corner of my brain calmly noted that his recording angle was excellent. But the hardest hit, the revelation that truly eradicated any lingering trace of my humanity, came on Thursday morning. While Julian was taking a long shower, I needed to verify the routing numbers he was using to communicate with his offshore buyers. I breached his encrypted financial folder using the master password I had decrypted 2 days prior. I expected to find the escrow account Omnitech was using to hold his massive payout. Instead, I found a digital ledger documenting our joint life savings. Every single dollar we had saved over 5 years of marriage was entirely gone. The balance read zero. He had systematically liquidated our mutual funds, our emergency savings, and the equity line on our house over the past 3 weeks. The total stolen funds came to over $800,000. I rapidly traced the wire transfers across 3 dummy corporations until they landed in a private banking institution in Zurich. He had used our entire life savings to purchase a stunning, secluded lakeside villa in Switzerland, completely outright in cash, and the property deed was registered solely under the name Vanessa Sterling. A suffocating, dark wave of pure hatred washed over me, a rage so intense and primal it made my vision black out for a fraction of a second. This was no longer just about corporate espionage or escaping a toxic marriage. He was not just leaving me to rot in a federal prison. He was financing his new, luxurious life with my blood, sweat, and tears. He wanted to drain me of every single ounce of dignity, sanity, and financial security until there was absolutely nothing left but a hollow, broken shell. I quietly closed the laptop screen and placed the machine exactly where he had left it on the desk. The time for panic was completely over. The time for playing the wounded victim had passed. Tomorrow was Friday. The deadline was finally here. He wanted a crazy wife who destroyed everything she touched, and I was going to give him exactly what he asked for. Thursday evening settled over the house with an unnatural, breathless quiet. The erratic, weeping wife from the previous day had completely vanished, carefully replaced by a woman in a state of fragile, medicated euphoria. I found Julian in his home office, casually reviewing blueprints. I leaned against the doorframe, offering him a soft, seemingly genuine smile. "I received an email from the executive board this afternoon," I said, my voice deliberately hushed, painting the perfect picture of someone desperate to hold on to a shred of professional dignity. "They are naming me Engineer of the Year to celebrate the completion of the new security infrastructure The company is hosting a private tribute banquet tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Julian looked up, his brow furrowing slightly before smoothing into an expression of bright, manufactured pride. They rented out the Diamond Ballroom at the Grand Plaza Hotel. I continued, stepping closer to his desk. I want everyone there. I want my parents. And I want your parents to come. The entire EtherCore board of directors will be in attendance. It is going to be the proudest moment of my entire career. I need you by my side. Julian. I watched the gears turning behind his dark eyes. It was a master stroke of manipulation, because it gave him exactly what he desperately needed. The grander the distraction, the better his alibi. While I was standing under the blinding spotlights on a stage, surrounded by hundreds of industry executives and both our families, he would be sitting comfortably in the audience. He could simply pull out his smartphone under the tablecloth, connect to his remote server, and quietly execute the final data transfer to Vanessa without a single person noticing. It was the perfect, airtight cover for the greatest corporate theft in history. Of course, sweetheart. He smiled warmly, standing up to wrap his arms tightly around me. I will call my parents right now and arrange for a private car to pick them up. You deserve this night. You have earned every bit of it. He kissed my forehead gently, entirely oblivious to the fact that he had just agreed to build his own scaffold in front of a live audience. Friday morning arrived crisp and bright. Once Julian drove away to his architectural firm, I sat down at my hidden terminal in the basement for the final time. I did not log into the EtherCore mainframe. Instead, I compiled a tightly encrypted digital dossier. Inside this folder, I placed the independent medical toxicology reports I had secretly acquired from a private clinic, detailing the exact concentration of the synthetic hallucinogenic toxins in my bloodstream. I attached the high-resolution photographs of Vanessa and Julian embracing at the penthouse, the decrypted chat logs plotting the theft, the financial records showing the total draining of our joint life savings, and the incontrovertible data transmission logs mapping his digital route into my company network. I routed the entire package through 3 anonymous proxy servers and sent it directly to the senior command desk of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cybercrime Division. I attached a single, heavily encrypted text note stating that a $3 billion corporate espionage transaction was scheduled to occur tonight at exactly 8:30, originating from the Grand Plaza Hotel. The board was set. The pieces were locked in place. There was no turning back. At 6 o'clock that evening, we stood in our master bathroom, preparing for the gala. The atmosphere was thick with a strange, electric anticipation. Julian looked impeccably sharp in a tailored, charcoal gray tuxedo. I wore a floor-length, backless emerald gown, my hair pinned up flawlessly. I looked absolutely nothing like a woman on the verge of a psychological collapse. I looked exactly like an executioner. Julian struggled slightly with the black silk bow tie around his collar, letting out an exasperated sigh. I stepped forward, gently brushing his hands away. "Let me do it," I murmured softly. He dropped his hands to his sides, tilting his chin up. I looped the smooth, cold silk around his neck. I stood mere inches away from him, close enough to feel the steady, rhythmic pulse of his heartbeat against my chest, close enough to smell the expensive bergamot cologne he had undoubtedly worn for Vanessa just days prior. My fingers moved with absolute, calculated precision, pulling the fabric taut, crossing the ends, and tightening the knot right against his throat. I gave it one final, firm tug, ensuring it sat perfectly, snugly against his Adam's apple. "You look incredibly handsome," I whispered, looking directly into his eyes, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "You are the absolute best husband in the world. Julian, I do not know what I would do without you." A wide, triumphant smile spread across his handsome face. He leaned down and kissed my lips softly, his hand resting securely on the small of my back. He felt completely victorious. He felt like a god among men, holding the invisible strings of a broken puppet. He smiled at me with absolute adoration, blissfully unaware that I was standing right in front of him, calmly and affectionately fitting the noose directly around his neck. The Diamond Ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was a masterclass in opulent excess. Massive crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm, fractured glow over 200 of the most powerful executives in the cybersecurity industry. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the sea of designer evening gowns and tailored tuxedos, balancing silver trays laden with champagne flutes and caviar canapes. The gentle hum of classical string music barely masked the low, buzzing undercurrent of corporate networking. It was the perfect, glittering stage for an execution. I sat at the primary VIP table, placed directly in the center of the room, right at the foot of the grand stage. Julian sat to my immediate right, playing his role with absolute, terrifying perfection. He held my hand on top of the crisp, white linen tablecloth, his thumb tracing slow, soothing circles over my knuckles. To anyone watching, he was the devoted anchor keeping his brilliantly talented but deeply stressed wife from drifting away. Across the table, Julian's mother, Eleanor, swirled her champagne and leaned in closely to speak to the EtherCore chief executive officer. She had been holding court for the past 30 minutes, ensuring everyone within earshot understood just how much her son had sacrificed for my career. "We are just so incredibly proud of Emery." "Of course," Eleanor practically purred, her diamond necklace catching the light. "But honestly, the real credit goes to my Julian. The hours she works, the absolute mental breakdowns she's been having lately due to the pressure. Julian has been a saint. He cooks, he cleans, he manages her medication, he practically keeps her breathing. Behind every great woman is an exhausted, dedicated man holding the pieces together." The chief executive officer nodded sympathetically, offering a polite, practiced smile. I did not flinch. I did not defend myself. I simply took a slow sip of my sparkling water and glanced down at Julian's lap. Underneath the concealment of the heavy tablecloth, his left hand was not resting. His fingers were flying across the glowing screen of his heavily encrypted smartphone. I watched the reflection of the screen in the polished silver blade of my butter knife. A green loading bar rapidly filled the width of the display. Then, a bold notification flashed across the glass. "Data download 100% complete. Package successfully transmitted to Omnitech external server." Julian locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his tuxedo pocket. A slow, deeply arrogant smirk curled the corner of his lips. He had done it. He had just handed my life's work, worth $3 billion, directly to his mistress. He thought he had won. He thought he was a king among peasants. A sharp tapping sound echoed through the massive ballroom as the chief executive officer tapped his microphone on the podium. The room instantly fell into a hushed, respectful silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the executive announced, his voice booming through the state-of-the-art sound system, "tonight, we are gathered to celebrate a monumental leap forward in digital security, the architect behind our impenetrable new mainframe, and our engineer of the year. Please welcome to the stage, Emery Davis." The ballroom erupted into deafening applause. Julian stood up first, pulling me to my feet and kissing my cheek aggressively for the cameras. He whispered in my ear that he loved me more than life itself. I smiled back at him, my eyes entirely dead, and turned to walk up the carpeted stairs. I stepped up to the acrylic podium. The blinding spotlights hit my face, washing out the crowd, but I could still perfectly see Julian sitting in the front row, beaming with false pride. Behind me stretched a massive theater-sized LED presentation screen, currently displaying the blue EtherCore Company logo. I gripped the edges of the podium. I did not look at my prepared index cards. I looked directly into Julian's dark eyes. "Thank you all," I began, my voice steady, sharp, and echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Most people stand up here and offer hollow thanks to their colleagues or empty platitudes about hard work. But tonight is different. I did not build this entire architecture alone. Tonight, I want to share my husband's greatest achievement. Julian shifted slightly in his chair, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. He had not authorized this deviation from the script. "Julian is an architect," I continued, my tone dropping into a cold, lethal register. He builds things, but recently, he decided to dismantle my life. Let me show you his masterwork. I pressed the remote clicker in my hand. The massive screen behind me did not transition to a PowerPoint presentation detailing corporate earnings. The screen flickered violently and cut to a live, mirrored desktop interface. It was Vanessa's workstation at Omnitech Industries. The audience murmured in deep confusion, recognizing the rival company's proprietary operating system logo. On the screen, a file folder labeled EtherCore Source Code had just been opened, but instead of displaying the stolen algorithm, a blinding blood-red command prompt window violently forced its way to the center of the display. Huge, blocky white letters began furiously typing themselves across the massive screen for all 200 executives to read. Trojan activated, initiating complete directory wipeout, deleting entire Omnitech database. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom. I watched Julian, all the blood drained from his face in a single, terrifying second, leaving his skin the color of wet ash. He stared at the screen, his jaw hanging completely slack, his eyes bulging as the red console rapidly listed every single competitor database being irreversibly reduced to digital ash in real time. That is right, I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing like a judge reading a death sentence. The data packet Julian just stole from my secure vault and transmitted to Omnitech was not our source code. It was a highly aggressive, self-executing digital bomb. Omnitech currently has exactly 0 functional servers left. Julian shot to his feet, knocking his heavy dining chair backward onto the floor with a loud crash. He opened his mouth to speak, to deny it, to scream, but no sound came out. I clicked the remote a second time. The red command prompt minimized. In its place, a high-definition video began playing on an endless loop. It was the crystal-clear footage I had recorded through the military scope. It showed Julian passionately shoving Vanessa against the glass wall of her luxury penthouse, tearing at her suit jacket. But the visual was nothing compared to the audio. I had managed to splice in a voice recording I captured from a hidden microphone I had planted in his home office 3 days ago. Julian's arrogant, sneering voice suddenly blasted through the ballroom speakers, louder than thunder. The hallucinogens are working perfectly, his recorded voice echoed, filling the dead silence of the room. She is losing her damn mind. I gave her another blue pill this morning. By the time I trigger the breach on Friday, she will have a documented psychotic break. I am going to let her rot in a federal psych ward while we take the $3 billion. The ballroom descended into absolute primal chaos. Eleanor, Julian's mother, let out a piercing, hysterical shriek before her eyes rolled back into her head, and she collapsed entirely limp onto the carpet, fainting dead away. Julian's father stood paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The entire EtherCore board of directors jumped to their feet, shouting in outrage. Julian looked around like a cornered animal. His carefully constructed reality had just been violently shattered into a million jagged pieces. Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally took over. He spun around, shoving a wealthy investor violently out of the way, and sprinted blindly toward the heavy mahogany exit doors at the back of the ballroom. He did not make it 10 feet. 4 waiters carrying silver trays suddenly dropped their cargo. The trays hit the floor with a deafening metallic crash, champagne glasses shattering everywhere. The waiters moved with terrifying, coordinated military precision. They tackled Julian to the carpet with bone-crushing force. One agent drove a heavy knee sharply into Julian's spine, ripping his arms backward until the sickening pop of a dislocated shoulder echoed nearby. The metallic zip of heavy-duty handcuffs ratcheted tightly around his wrists. "Julian Davis," one of the agents roared, pulling a gold Federal Bureau of Investigation badge from beneath his white vest. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and attempted murder." While Julian thrashed and screamed on the floor, pinning his face against the broken glass, I clicked the remote one final time. The screen flashed to a live news broadcast alert. The headline read that federal agents had just raided the Omnitech headquarters, arresting a senior executive named Vanessa Sterling for orchestrating a massive corporate theft. Julian stopped struggling. He lay pinned to the floor, breathing heavily, completely broken. He turned his head sideways, looking up at me on the stage with eyes filled with pure, unadulterated hatred and total defeat. "You set me up!" he screamed, his voice cracking violently, spitting blood from a cut on his lip. "You crazy witch! You set a trap for me!" I slowly stepped out from behind the podium. I walked down the carpeted stairs, my emerald gown sweeping gracefully behind me. The entire room fell completely silent, parting like the Red Sea to let me pass. I walked right up to where Julian was pinned against the floor by federal agents. I knelt down gracefully, leaning in close until my lips were merely an inch from his ear. "You are right, Julian," I whispered, my voice completely devoid of emotion, cold and sharp as a scalpel. "But you missed the best part. The data packet you just sent to Vanessa did not just destroy her servers. I embedded a secondary script. The moment it executed, it automatically accessed the banking credentials you saved on her machine. It transferred every single cent from your hidden Swiss account into an anonymous, untraceable global charity fund." I pulled back just enough to watch his eyes widen in absolute, bottomless horror. "The house is gone," I stated flatly. "The money is gone. Your reputation is gone. You have absolutely nothing left. Julian, you are a ghost." I stood up, turning my back on him without a second glance. The federal agents violently hauled him to his feet and dragged him kicking and screaming out the double doors, his pathetic wails echoing down the hallway until they finally faded into nothing. The heavy doors slammed shut, and the room was mine. Exactly 1 year later, the world is remarkably quiet. The suffocating weight that used to press down on my chest every time I walked through my front door has completely vanished, replaced by the clean, sharp air of total freedom. The legal fallout from that night in the Diamond Ballroom was swift and utterly merciless. Julian is currently sitting in a cold, concrete cell at a maximum security federal penitentiary. He pleaded guilty to avoid a drawn-out trial, but the judge showed absolutely no leniency. He was handed a 20-year sentence for economic treason, corporate espionage, and aggravated assault for the systematic poisoning. Vanessa fared no better, receiving 15 years for her central role in the conspiracy. As for Omnitech, the total erasure of their proprietary databases, combined with crippling federal fines, drove them into absolute, catastrophic bankruptcy within 3 months. Perhaps the most poetic justice is the absolute silence Julian now endures. His parents, the exact same people who once boasted loudly about his sacrifices, have completely severed ties with him. Eleanor could not handle the crushing public humiliation of watching her beloved son exposed as a manipulative predator on a massive screen in front of elite industry executives. They changed their phone numbers and refused every single collect call he tried to make from the prison payphone. He is entirely alone, stripped of his wealth, his reputation, and the very family he thought would always blindly support his arrogance. My divorce was finalized smoothly over the summer. I walked away from the marriage with $0 from his accounts, primarily because the federal government had already seized every last asset he possessed. But I kept the only thing that truly mattered: my complete intellectual property rights. EtherCore rewarded my loyalty and my ruthless execution of the security protocol by promoting me to Chief Technology Officer. I am standing right now in my new corner office on the top floor of the EtherCore Tower. The morning sun pours through the tall glass windows, casting a warm, golden glow across my expansive mahogany desk. I look out over the sprawling city skyline, watching the millions of lives moving below, feeling utterly invincible. I reach down and pick up a small, elegant glass display case resting on the edge of my desk. Inside the polished glass rests the heavy silver watch Julian gave me for our anniversary. I carefully stripped out the military-grade GPS tracker, removed the data node, and gutted its internal gears. It is just an empty, hollow shell now. Some gifts are born to bind you, but if you are smart enough, You can use that exact same chain to strangle your enemy. The watch is dead, but my time is only just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please share your location in the comments below. If you found today's narrative compelling and want to support the Violet Revenge Stories channel, please consider donating just $1. You can easily do this by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link provided in the video description and the pinned comment. Your incredible generosity helps pay our hardworking staff, allowing them to feed their families and continue creating these powerful stories for you. Thank you for standing with me, and I will see you in the next chapter.